and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't made yourself a nice cup of coffee or tea, then pause the video, make yourself a cup of coffee, because today we're going back to basics. Oh, you're back! Alright, let's get started. Okay. So why is it important that we go back to basics? When we choose this lifestyle, we need to understand why we choose this lifestyle. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the body does with the food we eat. Obviously, I'm not a scientist, so this information won't be sciencey, but hopefully I will be explaining this information in a way that makes sense to you, the way that it made sense to me. Okay, so when we eat carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, our body uses the carbohydrates immediately as an energy source. What happens to the fat and the proteins? It gets stored as fat as a reserve for energy use later. So now we're removing the carbohydrates from our diet. This means our body is forced to use fat as the energy source. Why is that a good thing? Because when we use fat as an energy source, the body uses the energy more gradually. This means that you have more energy for longer periods of time, and you don't have a sudden energy crash the way you would when you're eating carbs as an energy source. The other reason this is a good thing is once the body has used up the fat that was taken in during the day, it starts to use the fat that's already being stored in the body, and that is the fat that we really want to target. Okay, so one of the first things that we need to cover is how much fat, protein, and carbohydrates a person should take in daily. 80% of your daily nutritional intake should be fat, 15% should be protein, and only 5% should be carbohydrates. Here's where the trick comes in. There are carbohydrates in most things that we take in. Things like yogurt, milk, cheese, all have a certain amount of carbohydrates, even vegetables. Attached, I will leave a link of the red, orange, and green lists that tell you green things that you can have a lot more of versus the red things that you need to remove from your diet completely. Those things would be like potatoes, bread, all sorts of white starches. Another important thing about a low carb lifestyle is that a person should limit yourself to 21 grams of net carbs per day. How can you work out your net carbs? You take the carbohydrates on the label minus the dietary fibers. That will give you your total net carbs. But I have found that using an app such as the Carb Control app, which I'm currently using, makes this process a lot easier. But I've also found during my low carb lifetime is that people believe because they're not eating carbs, they can now eat as much protein as they'd like. Unfortunately, your protein still needs to be portioned. So how I worked out my amount of protein that I take in, I took my goal weight, which is about 60 kilograms, and that is how much protein I allow myself daily. So the goal weight to protein is a 1-to-1 ratio, specifically for women. There's a lot more leniency when it comes to a man. They can eat a lot more protein than a woman, especially men that are physically very active can have a lot more protein. But what my husband decided to do was he took his goal weight and he times it by 1.5 to determine how many grams of proteins he can take in on a daily basis. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a screen recording of how we use the Carb Control app. So as you can see, there's nothing entered here. We have set it so we're allowed to only have 21 grams of net carbs. So this will calculate our carbs for us that we have breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a snack. While we're on the topic, snacking is not a good idea in the beginning when you're trying to lose weight. So we're going to add a food. As you can see, you can search for foods, you can use your favorite foods, and you can customize foods. When I go into favorite foods, you can see that there are many things that we've already searched for, but that we use a lot. So let's say we had some nice bacon. We had about 3 servings, and we log that to breakfast. We also had an egg, fried egg, 2 of them, and we log that to breakfast. Now when we go to custom foods, you can add any new food that you can't search for on the app. This could be something that you bought at the supermarket that you want to add the serving type, the carbs, the dietary fibers, the total fat and the proteins. Those are the most important things. Now we're back at the home page, and this gives us a good idea of where we're standing with our carbs, our fat, and our protein. This is looking quite good. Obviously the carbs are very low, which means the proteins look like there is a lot more, but this would be an acceptable day in my opinion. So you can also track your weight. You can add your weight and your goal weight, and you can look at your goals for the day. Here we've set the goals to 21 carbs, 60 grams of protein, and 300 grams of fat. As you can see, there's only 21 grams of protein in 3 pieces of bacon and 2 eggs. Obviously, there are multiple options for carb counting apps. There is the Banting app, Real Meal Revolution, so many to choose from. I don't know all of them. I don't know their names, but there are so many to choose from. When we purchased the Carb Control app, it was still for free. I think it's now has a purchasing price, but it's probably the best one because it allows us to see our percentage intakes as well as our grams of proteins and carbs, which makes our life a lot easier. Obviously, a person shouldn't believe that this is the way you're going to live for the rest of your life, but during the weight loss period, it's very important to track these things to make sure you're 100% on par. Later on, a person can start to introduce a little bit more carbs, a little bit less fat, and you can also start to introduce low carb, keto, or Banting desserts. Why this isn't something that we have to introduce in the beginning is because even sweeteners such as xylitol and stevia spike our insulin levels to a certain extent. This can prevent a person from going into ketosis. Why do we want our bodies to be in ketosis? So ketosis means that your body is using fat as an energy source. Hopefully this will give you a basic understanding of how we choose to live our low carb lifestyle. Once we reached our goal weight, we allowed a lot more leniency in our diet. We probably only used the app for a month and a half tops. Now that we are going back to basics with you guys, because we also need to lose weight, we are jumping back onto the app and counting our macros very strictly. So another important thing that we do is we've introduced intermittent fasting into our lives. So what is intermittent fasting? For a certain period of time, you don't consume anything with nutritional value. So this excludes black coffee, black tea, or water. So why do we fast? Essentially, fasting cleanses our body of toxins. So when we fast, our body doesn't have its usual access to glucose, sugars. So this forces our cells to find other means of generating energy. This brings us back to the importance of ketosis, when our body uses fat cells as energy. So there are many different ways to do intermittent fasting. What we've decided to do is to fast for a 16-hour period every day. This means we have our last cup of tea with milk or our last meal at about 6 o'clock at night and reintroduce nutrition only after 10 o'clock the next day. During the first 8 hours of the fast, our body uses all of the things that we consume during the day as energy. So for the second 8 hours, our body detoxes and uses the stored fat as an energy source. So what are the benefits other than the weight loss? It boosts cognitive functioning, so brain power. It protects us from becoming obese and other related chronic diseases. It reduces inflammation, for instance, in your joints. It also benefits cancer patients. Recent studies have shown that fasting during chemotherapy jumpstarts the immune system and exposes the cancer cells. Okay, so now that you have a basic understanding, I want to explain why we decided to be a low carb channel and not a keto or a Banting channel, even though it's very similar. There are quite a few restrictions on the Banting and keto diet that we've decided we don't want to implement in our lifestyle, because we've not decided that this is a detox, but that it's a lifestyle change. Things like milk, for instance. The keto diet suggests that you replace your milk with a milk substitute, such as almond milk or coconut milk, milk or heavy cream, whereas we still drink normal full cream milk, but obviously we count the carbs and keep it below 21 grams per day. Other things we do allow ourselves are things like alcohol, but obviously we cannot overindulge, especially in things like beer, because they have a high carbohydrate intake. What we like to drink is a glass of dry red or dry white wine, because it's about 4 grams of carbs per glass. Then the last thing that's very frowned upon, not just by the keto and Banting community, but also any other health community, is the diet cool drinks. So that's a wrap. Now you know a lot more about the type of lifestyle we live, kinds of rules that we follow, and this will be your guideline when we're looking at the kinds of foods that we eat and the kinds of recipes we make. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, then like and subscribe to our channel. We've also been sharing some of the delicious food that we've been making, and we will make a follow-up video about 3 recipes that we did during the week. Thank you for spending time with us, and we will see you again soon.